The HOA president called 911 on my wife, and I still remember the exact second everything snapped. The cop opened one of her sealed military containers, froze, and whispered, "Ma'am, are you Delta Force?" And in that instant, before anyone else understood what they were witnessing, I knew Grace Perez had just detonated her own life. She just didn't know it yet. We'd moved to Pine Ridge a week earlier, chasing this fantasy of a quiet cabin and a slower lifestyle. No honking, no sirens, no rush hour misery. Just air that didn't taste like exhaust fumes. But the universe has a twisted sense of humor because Pine Ridge wasn't peaceful. It was a perfectly manicured dystopia patrolled by an HOA with more rules than the federal government, and all of it controlled by one woman who'd never been told no in her entire life. That Saturday morning started out normal enough. My wife Julia and I pulled up in a rental truck filled with her gear military storage containers that looked like they'd been borrowed from a classified warehouse. Heavy metal, weather-sealed, intimidating even to me, and I'm married to the woman who lifted them like they were filled with pillows. Every time she moved one, I swear another curtain across the street twitched open. Pine Ridge residents watched like we were unloading a UFO. Julia barely spoke, just worked with that calm efficiency she always had. Years of training had ingrained precision into every movement. But 10 minutes into unloading, a tiny, furious storm named Grace Perez marched across our driveway like she was storming the beaches of Normandy. 5 feet of pure entitlement clutching an HOA binder thick enough to be used as armor. "Excuse me?" she barked, like we were her delinquent employees. "I'm Grace Perez, president of the Pine Ridge HOA, and you cannot move those items without proper permits." Julia didn't even look up. She just kept working. Grace reacted like she'd been slapped by the hand of God. I watched her face shift confusion, disbelief, then pure rage. She jabbed her finger at the containers, shouting about community safety protocols and military-grade threats. And Julia. She only gave her a bored glance and said, "Ma'am, it's a resistance band for physical therapy." Grace's brain short-circuited. I actually saw the moment where she stopped thinking and went straight into panic mode. She yanked out her phone with shaking hands and dialed 911, making sure the entire neighborhood heard her say the words, "military weapons." And that's when I realized something was deeply wrong with this woman. Nobody rational jumps from moving day to terrorist threat in under a minute. Within 10 minutes, a patrol car rolled up and Grace's face lit up like she'd just summoned the Avengers. "Officer Mitchell." "Thank God you're here," she called, waving wildly. The officer looked exhausted before he even stepped out of the car. Then he said something that made Grace blink. "Yeah, I live on Oak Street. What's going on?" Oh, she hated that. Grace launched into this frantic monologue about Julia refusing inspections, violating section this and subsection that, pointing dramatically at boxes like they were ticking bombs. Julia finally stopped, wiped her hands on her jeans, and handed over her ID. No fear, no attitude, just calm professionalism. And then the shift happened. The cop recognized something. He took her ID to his car and ran it. When the radio crackled, his posture changed completely. Subject confirmed. Active security clearance. Decorated veteran. He walked back over and gave her a respectful nod. "Ma'am, thank you for your service." The entire crowd murmured. Someone whispered, "Oh my God, she's actually legit." Grace's jaw dropped so hard I thought she'd dislocated. But she wasn't done humiliating herself. When the officer opened Julia's first container and saw the Bronze Star with Valor, he practically straightened to attention. Grace sputtered something about fake medals and stolen valor, but nobody was listening. The neighborhood was witnessing her meltdown in real time. I thought that would be the end. A normal person would have slunk home, maybe poured a stiff drink, maybe Googled how to apologize gracefully. But Grace? No. Grace didn't retreat. She escalated. 3 days later, she called an emergency HOA meeting. And when I say emergency, I mean she packed the community center like she was holding a press conference exposing aliens. She rolled out a full PowerPoint titled, "Unvetted Military Personnel in Civilian Communities," and every slide looked like it was stolen from a conspiracy theory basement. Stock photos of soldiers, red circles around random gear, and captions like potential infiltration risk. Julia sat in the front row, calm as stone, while Grace's voice shook with manic energy. Then came her expert witness, her brother-in-law Tom, a man who had clearly never seen a push-up in his life, claiming he served in special operations. Someone whispered, "Isn't he a used car salesman?" And suddenly the room felt like it was cracking open. Officer Mitchell stood up next. "I've responded to 12 false alarms from this address in 6 months," he said plainly, looking right at Grace. "The only threat to this community is the pattern of harassment coming from the HOA president." Neighbors murmured louder. A board member groaned. Someone in the back muttered, "Finally." Then Sarah Williams, a retired principal, raised her hand and said, "I motion for a vote of no confidence in Ms. Perez." Grace lost her mind. "You can't do this to me," she shrieked. "I know things about all of you. I have records. I have photos." Then she looked at one man, David Brooks, and he went pale. And right then I realized something horrifying. Grace didn't lead through authority. She led through leverage, fear, secrets, blackmail. That night I genuinely felt defeated. Sitting in our half-unpacked living room, I asked myself if we'd made a huge mistake moving here. Maybe we should have ignored the cabin listing. Maybe we should have picked a different town. I hated the feeling that I'd dragged Julia into a mess she didn't deserve. For the first time I felt small, powerless. Like no matter what we did, this woman would twist things until we were the villains. Julia sat down beside me, rested her hand on my shoulder, and said in that quiet, certain way she has, "People like Grace only stop when someone stands up to them. We don't run." That was the first moment I felt the fear lift. Not disappear, just loosen enough for me to breathe. If Julia wasn't giving up, neither was I. And then the twist hit. The next afternoon, David knocked on our door. He looked broken, dark circles, trembling hands, eyes darting like a man being hunted. He stepped inside and whispered, "I need to tell you something about Grace. Something I should have told everyone months ago." And the floodgates opened. Grace had video of him picking up his kids 30 minutes early during a messy custody battle. Nothing criminal, just enough to weaponize. She'd used it to force him to film people for her report, Neighbors Gather Gossip Spy on Families. She'd blackmailed him into being her eyes and ears. Then he said the sentence that changed everything. "She told me she's planning something big, something to prove you two are dangerous." Julia and I exchanged a look. That cold electric jolt of recognition when everything suddenly makes horrible sense. So we built a plan. Hidden cameras, security logs, documentation. David would record her conversations. We'd track her movements. Julia approached it like an operation, calm, strategic, calculating. I watched her slip back into a mode I'd only glimpsed on rare occasions, and honestly, it scared me a little. Not because she was dangerous, but because she was prepared for a level of danger I didn't fully understand until that moment. Then David delivered the final blow. "She showed me a bag," he whispered. "Fireworks, ammunition, and something else. She said she's going to plant them in your cabin tomorrow night." My stomach dropped. That was a federal-level setup, the kind that ruins lives permanently. Julia didn't react with panic. She didn't gasp or swear. She only nodded once and said, "Then we catch her." That night we armed the cameras. Not just the obvious ones. Julia added small hidden units in blind spots I didn't even know existed. High angles, low angles, overlapping fields of view, infrared, motion-triggered audio. She'd turned our property into a tactical perimeter before I even realized she'd unpacked the gear. And then Grace made her move. 11:45 p.m. Motion alert. Julia picked up the tablet and we watched Grace dressed in all black, carrying a duffel bag, creeping toward our storage shed. She muttered to herself the entire time, and every chilling sentence was caught by our microphones. "Let's see how they like federal drug charges," she whispered at one point, shoving bags behind Julia's equipment. "Security threat my ass. I'll show them a threat." I'd always thought the term unhinged was exaggerated. Not anymore. While she worked, David was at his window recording from the second angle and calling Officer Mitchell. "Grace Perez is breaking into the Reed's shed right now," he said, voice shaking but steady enough to save us. 4 minutes later, the patrol car pulled up, lights flashing silently. Julia and I met him at the door, tablet in hand. "It's all on camera," she told him. "Every second." Mitchell watched the footage and shook his head slowly. "All right," he said. "Let's go get her." He walked to the shed, opened the door, and shined his flashlight inside. Grace jerked upright, eyes wide, still holding a bag of illegal substances surrounded by everything she'd planted. "Ma'am," he said calmly, "step out with your hands visible." She froze. Completely. Then she sputtered, "This isn't what it looks like. I was conducting a security investigation." Even Mitchell couldn't hold back a sigh. "Ma'am, you have the right to remain silent." The ironic, perfect justice of it all nearly knocked me off my feet. By 7 in the morning, the entire neighborhood knew. By noon, people were coming forward. Years of blackmail threats, extortion, petty fines, fabricated violations. Families she'd squeezed for money. Parents she'd intimidated. People she'd terrorized behind closed doors. Within 2 weeks, Grace was removed as HOA president, charged with multiple felonies, and evicted from the very community she tried to control. The woman who demanded total obedience ended up standing in court powerless for the first time in her life, hearing the judge sentence her to 3 years. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel vengeful. I just felt relieved. Like a storm that had hovered above us finally broke and washed everything clean. And here's the truth I learned the hard way. Bullies collapse the moment people stop being afraid.